Welcome back. So it's time to focus on policy implementation, and we will set this against the backdrop of the role of the Nigeria Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPSS. And we have joining us on the program this morning the Director General of the Institute itself, Professor Ayo Omotayo. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Good morning.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on the program. So I want us to start this way. Many who attend, the NIPSS, particularly the Senior Executive Course 46, they laud the Institute for its drill and how, they are trained to think Nigeria first. And, quite a number of these distinguished gentlemen and ladies who attend from the corridors of power. But what we see is a disconnect, between the values that are instilled in them and the lack of efficacy, so to speak, of policy implementation, of the policies that are implemented that serve as intervention, either for the economy or for the other aspects of life. I'd like you to speak to this for starters. How can you explain this seeming contrast?
Well, thank you very much for that question. And let me just let you know that every Nigerian is concerned about what questions you have raised. But basically, we have to understand a few things. First, not until recently has any government tried a direct approach at policy harmonization like President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is doing right now. Just last week, we concluded a validation workshop on a national policy development framework that he asked that the National Institute carries out together with his special advisor on monitoring and evaluation of projects and, of course, on policy advice. The reason why there appears to be a policy disconnect is basically because governments come and they have different priorities. As we speak, Nigeria does not, by constitution, have a national priority in terms of what our priorities are in terms of health, the agri sector, the economic sector, so to say. So we have a situation where we sit at NIPSS, we look at the Nigerian polity based on the mandate we have been given, and we set out to research and reflect into some of these issues of our own time. And when we come up with policy briefs, we send it to government, and if it meets their priorities, sometimes they absorb everything, sometimes they just pick a few of it, and sometimes those things are left on the shelf. So for us at the National Institute, we have been doing our best to ensure that even before issues arise, we come up with policies that can address those issues. You will not forget that the National Center was set up as Nigeria's highest think tank, a center, the highest center for reflection, for research and dialogue by Nigerians of high academic achievement and, of course, policy initiators and executors. They come from all walks of the Nigerian lives, and of course, they understand what the issues are. And when we get together at the National Institute in this serene place in Plateau called Furu, what we do is to forget about how big we are or what we have achieved in the past. We all in humble submission, subject ourselves to a process of rethinking Nigeria's problem across all sectors and looking for solutions to them. But like I said earlier, when we come up with these solutions, sometimes it may not meet the priority of the government in power. And like I've said, this is the first time that the federal government will ask the National Institute to work together with a specific agency of the presidency on harmonization of policies. You may not know that up until now, we do not have a meeting point for policy considerations or a meeting point of policy dissemination. Every agencies, all the MDs come up with their own policies and execute based on what they feel their mandates are. But as a nation, we are getting together for the first time to ensure that policies are harmonized. And once we can get this framework passed at the National Assembly or approved by the Federal Executive Council, we are going to have a better and a coordinated approach at policies in Nigeria. Gone will be the days of policy somersaults or policy clashes among our MDs.
You know, Prof, that is quite telling. Again, I refer to feedback from those who have attended the NIPSS. They talk about how it is instilled in them to think Nigeria first, to buy Nigeria and all of that. But what we see is, you know, our elected representatives choosing exotic cars and extravagant lifestyles, and we wonder if they're the same persons who have attended the NIPSS Institute. But Prof, I'd like to now zero in on specific policies. What is your position on the contentious policy of fuel subsidy removal of the federal government, and by extension, you know, the Naira for crude policy, those twin policies? What are your thoughts on them?
Yes, for us at the National Institute, and I've said this on public television, that the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a very courageous government. We have reports here over the years advising government to look at this matter of fuel subsidy. We were at a point where the nation was going to collapse if the president did not take the steps he took. So for us at the National Institute, it was a very timely step that Mr. President took, and it has gone a long way in saving Nigeria. We were on the verge of collapse with subsidies. The subsidies we were paying were just totally unimaginable, and of course, we were subsidizing fuel as far as Burkina Faso, as far as Sierra Leone in some instances. So a government that wants to succeed must take very tough decisions. And for us at National Institute, we commend the president for the removal of fuel subsidy. Even though the Nigerian polity may feel it is harsh, that we needed some more time to study it, but I bet you, if Mr. President had stayed a day longer in office, and he hadn't taken that decision he took, I don't believe
but again,
he would
Prof,
have been able to take that.
Prof, the reason I asked that question,
yes,
the reason I asked that question is because, again, feedback from those who have attended the Institute speak about the drill on policy, about how they are asked to rigorously research policy and refer to how it is conducted in other climes before they arrive at an ideal policy for intervention in any challenge in society. And if we were to look at the fuel subsidy removal policy, we find that in other climes, there are critical subsidy interventions for areas such as agriculture, such as petroleum products. But why is Nigeria adopting, you know, something that is counterproductive for its own people? And why is the NIPSS subscribing to this as against what it teaches those who attend the Institute?
Okay, thank you very much. Even before President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came into office, we have researched this, and we know that the subsidy was not going to be sustainable over a longer period. Other governments knew this, but they didn't have the courage because of this same effect that we are running from. Yes, it will be tough initially, but it is the best way to go. The National Institute does not exist to make people happy unnecessarily. What we try to do is to say, these are the pills you need to take if you want to achieve these particular goals. So the pills of the subsidy removal is a bitter one, no doubt. And we knew from the onset that there will be need for Nigerians to suddenly adjust. We have been on the feeding bottle for 48 years or so. And now, if you're asking somebody who has been on the feeding bottle for 48 years to suddenly just look elsewhere for his or our own food, there will be resistance. So for us, We know it will be hard for Nigerians. And Mr. President took steps. We spoke about palliatives, which of course he did his best. But do not forget that Mr. President sits in Abuja. State governors are everywhere. Local government chairmen are everywhere. All the subnationalities are there. They are also supposed to help in the implementation, effective implementation of the subsidies that were supposed to go with the removal of the subsidies. So to a large extent, Mr. President, together with the Executive Council members, have done their best in ensuring that palliatives reach those that are supposed to have them, and also to ensure that the effects, the negative effects, are well contained. You are aware now that because of first subsidy removal, we have gone into the use of gas. Gas has always been there, and we never took it so seriously. Using gas is an outcome of our theme 45 study tour, where we're looking at alternative energy for Nigeria.
All right, Prof, if I may come in now.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, if I may come in. You know, we can debate about this as much as we can. You talked about gas as quite a good initiative with the CNG, but the penetration hasn't been as effective as it should be. The issue of palliative to cushion the effects of the removal of fuel subsidy, as well as the removal of subsidy on even FX, hasn't been as effective as it should be, because the records are there in terms of moving the needle. So in your books, because you've said Nigeria has been on a feeding bottle for a long time, what was wrong with the subsidy? Because I've seen leaders come and blame people or let me use the word now, make people make that sacrifice as far as repositioning our economic fortune is concerned, except themselves. So what was wrong with the subsidy? Was it
Thank you very much.
poor, just a moment. Was it poor management of the subsidy regime itself, or the corruption in the subsidy? Because even places like China subsidizes their own foreign exchange. There are places I could call that do some level of subsidy or the other in different sectors. So from your research, what was wrong exactly with the subsidy? Because Nigerians feel that this is one place that the government was helping, but the government said, we're going to take this out because it's killing.
First, there is nothing wrong with subsidy. Every government subsidizes one thing or the other based on the objective of that particular government. In this case, the subsidy regime over the years was not properly managed. Every government struggled with the management of this subsidy regime. And if it was going to kill the Nigerian people, I was going to be benefiting a smaller percentage of our populace, I think it was the right time for it
to go. Sorry, Prof, I don't want to cut your line of thought. If something was not properly managed, wouldn't effective, better management would have been the approach rather than removing it entirely? We're just brainstorming here because you're a policy person. The argument is that there were cheats in the system benefiting the rich, and, you know, the poor was not really benefiting. So the whole idea is take it out from everybody, so everybody suffers. Of course, the rich will not suffer.
Well, the good thing is this, that you also mentioned that those who needed subsidies were not getting them. They were even subsidizing the rich. Our subsidy regime came to a level where the poor people were basically subsidizing the rich. Now, you spoke about having or looking for effective way of managing these things. We failed over several years trying to manage these things. And of course, it was the best thing to look for other ways of subsidizing the poor than using what is not to subsidize the rich. The first subsidy, as we had it, was basically benefiting the rich. They were the ones that had 5, 10 cars. They were the ones driving all the big jeeps. The poor man just wanted to get in a bus. But then we had a whole lot of entrenched interests. Interests that I could say were demonic, that were controlling government because they had subsidy money. So Mr. President, from my own understanding, didn't want any of those. He just said, let us look for other ways of subsidizing the poor. Let's fuel subsidy go, because it brings about efficiency in the marketplace. We couldn't even manage our borders, and of course, we do not have the resources to fully manage our borders. fuel was going as far as Burkina Faso. Nigeria was subsidizing everybody. It meant that average Nigerian was subsidizing fuel usage in Niger, in Burkina Faso, and in all other countries. So we needed to, first of all, remove the fuel subsidy. Let us look at the ramifications of the challenges it was going to bring, which already we are seeing. And of course, government is intervening. We need fuel to drive our vehicles, to run our machines. And of course, we had gas that we were wasting for so long. So why would we keep putting money on fuel subsidy while we were wasting gas? I agree with you. It is tough now, but it is the only way out for any, to be candid, the courage to do it.
So, Prof, let me ask you the question.
There for other governments. And this president had the courage to do it. I am personally convinced, those of us at the National Institute are convinced, everybody that has come here to study, that we have asked to look all the groups, nobody, not a single one has said fuel should be subsidized at the rate at which it's being subsidized in Nigeria.
Prof, before my colleague comes in to further ask questions, this is the question the poor will ask. Now that the subsidy has been removed, and this president, of course, when he makes up his mind, he has made up his mind. Now that the subsidy has been removed, both for FX and even PMS, how is this benefiting us in the short term, and how will it benefit us in the long term? Does the Institute have an answer to such critical questions? Because this is what they are looking at. I used to buy fuel less than 200. It now fluctuates between 900, 800, depending on the season. I used to buy XYZ products for a certain amount. Now it has gone, the price is quite high. You know, FX used to be around 700, now it's about 1.5. So how is this benefiting the poor in the short term and in the long term? It's going to benefit the poor in the long term. And then Bukola will ask a question.
Well, most of the benefits will be in the medium and in the long term. In the short term, the government has tried to put out palliatives so that those who are suffering, the poor man on the street from the effect of fuel subsidy, would be able to make some adjustments. We need all to make adjustments to our spendings. So in the short term, yes. If you take the foreign exchange matter, the removal of subsidy on foreign exchange, you will see that now we do not have super rich people making premium off the dollars that are given to them. Everybody in a fair marketplace, you go there, if you need the dollar, go and look for it, no more restrictions. So everybody will have to adjust their spending, adjust their taste. With the removal of the fuel subsidy, we have Dangote coming on. We have the other refineries. The refinery in Port Harcourt has worked continuously for 110 days, if I've counted right. These are the short-term gains. Where we are buying fuel a little bit more expensive, but we predict at National Institute that if we continue with what we are currently doing, fuel by itself will come down. We're looking at it coming down as low as 750 before the end of the year. And of course, foreign exchange, we believe, will still drop to about 1.3 before the end of the year. And it is going to continue like that as our more refineries come into place. We will become a net exporter in the long run. The gains at this time are very little, but then in the long run, we will make up for whatever sacrifices we have made today as Nigerians. I mentioned gas. Look at the difference between the price of PMS and gas. And for over 50 years, we were burning gas as if we didn't have any alternative. Now, on this gas matter, let me just land on this gas matter. You see, government would provide the enabling environment. The gas we now have will lead to other investments. There will be more jobs for people. We will use the gas, and of course, the cost of driving our machines, driving our vehicles will come down. Look at our costs coming down. We look at those who are going to invest in gas, the jobs it will spin off. A whole lot of things are coming down the Nigerian way.
All right.
And we have to commend the president for taking these actions. To be candid, if we had stayed on fuel subsidy till now, the country would have gone down financially. We would have gone down the way of Argentina. With what money were we going to continue to subsidize?
All right, Prof. I like your optimism, but I wonder if, you know, the possibility of reduction in the pump price of petrol will materialize in the coming weeks rather than or months, because the critical conversation that should lead to the continuing reduction has been stalled, and there is no accountability from government on whether or not it is still holding. And in fact, the measure of importation of petroleum products that Nigeria is bringing into the country, we don't know how it has reduced following the resumption of work of the Port Harcourt refinery and the Warri refinery. The NNPC is not giving us the numbers that we expect to have. My own, you know, reservation is the seeming contradiction between your support, which would be the official position of the NIPSS for subsidy removal, as against his own approach at teaching policy formulation, which would be how it is done in other climes. There seems to be a contradiction there from the feedback of those who have attended.
There is no contradiction, madam. We have said that some forms of subsidies may be necessary in different sectors of the economy. For us in Nigeria, saying that there should be we should drop fuel subsidy does not mean there is any contradiction. The National Institute exists to formulate policies, to advise government on policies. In the outcome of our 10-month study of about 96 participants in 2023 came out with the fact that we needed to switch over to gas as our transition fuel, and that government has done. A whole lot of infrastructure will come into place. We expect the private sector to come into this industry and let people invest. And of course, we need investment in gas distribution right now. And I'm sure we'll get it. There is no contradiction. We have not said that subsidy we shouldn't give some form of subsidy. And of course, even giving out palliatives is some form of subsidies. And of course, you know, government took steps to ensure that food prices that were affected, to ensure that transportation costs that were affected were immediately brought down by ensuring that big buses were retrofitted with gas engines for almost for as little as nothing. So there is no contradiction.
The jury is out there.
We are clear on our mandate. We know what we have advised government. We know what we are advocating. And I'm sure in another 3 years, people will be happy that the oil sector becomes a fair playing sector where nobody has an advantage over the other. If you want to import fuel, you have to fight to bring it at a lower cost than what Dangote is doing. You have to bring it at a lower cost than what
the jury is out there on the efficacy or the necessity of this particular subsidy. And I believe that, you know, the verdict substantially has come through, or whether or not it has favored Nigerians, the generality of Nigerians. It's clearly an ongoing conversation, and we wish we had more time to engage you on this very thorny subject. But we must thank you very much at this point. We've been talking with Professor Ayo Motayo, the Director General, National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPSS, who joined us virtually. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And from here, we move on to another important subject matter, which would be women in leadership. Stay with us. We'll be right back.